So let's have a look at some definitions. So there are a lot of acronyms in digital marketing, and none more so than actually in paid search itself. So when we're talking about paid search, it's good to get an understanding of some of these terms. And apologies if I'm preaching to the choir here. So these are kind of the most common ones that you'll come across. So CPC is simply cost per click, and this is just the amount you pay each time a user clicks on your ad. This can also be known as PPC as well, so pay per click. And then we've got CPM, which is cost per mil, and this is cost per 1,000 impressions. So I mentioned before that you can either look at paying each time your ad is clicked on, or less commonly, each time your ad is shown. So those are two distinct strategies there. So if you were going for cost per 1,000 impressions, this is much more of an awareness thing that you just want to remind people that you're there. But I would recommend normally going down the cost per click route anyway. Then we've got SEM, search engine marketing. So this is a bit more of a broader term, which does encompass SEO from time to time as well, which is search engine optimization. And then SERP, which is one of my favorites, and that it just stands for search engine results page. So that is basically what your user sees when they do perform a search. So thinking about where PPC sits in the funnel, so where does paid search sit? So this is just an example of a traditional marketing funnel, going from awareness through to interest, decision making, and then the action. So the action is the conversion. Now, paid search kind of sits in the decision and action phase of the funnel. So this is where we know that users have a high intent. People have performed a search on a particular term. So this is where we can really grab people's attention. So it's moving people through that consideration phase. So if we took as an example somebody searching for aged UK services in their local area, we know that that is quite a warm lead, that they are really trying to ready to perform that action. Now, in terms of the action could be anything from signing up to an email newsletter, um, donating, or just making any other point of contact. So that's kind of where PPC sits in the funnel. But what you should always remember is to clearly identify your aims and objectives. There's no point in doing this kind of activity if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. So it's always worth bearing in mind what your KPIs are, because there is obviously the resource issue that goes into this as well. Right, so that was a really speedy overview of what paid search is. Do we have any questions at this stage?
Yeah, if you do, you can either just type them in the chat window, or you can type them in there, and we can come back at the session at the end if you think of something as we go along. But yeah, if there's nothing, then we can, Matt can just look on to the next bit.
Great. Okay. So now we'll take a look at the Google Grant. So I'm assuming most of you are familiar with what a Google Grant is, but this is a really quick overview for you. So Google Ad Grants lets non-profits advertise with Google AdWords for free. So this is a really great opportunity for all non-profits. It's free advertising spend. The only implication here really is your resource and the time and effort you can allot to it. But I would recommend that everyone does at least apply for the Google Grant. Because obviously it's free advertising spend that you might not have access to before. So there is the resource implication, which I need to reiterate. But once you get set up, you can let it run, so that you might not need to actually allocate that much to it. It's just that kind of heavy lifting that you need to do in the first instance. So the application process itself can be quite laborious. So first you need to see if you are eligible. Now to do this, there is an eligibility checker, but I'm pretty confident that each of you would be eligible in the first instance anyway, being registered charities. They do make us jump through hoops to get this, and I guess that's kind of understandable. There is quite a strict application process. So you would need to apply for a Google for Nonprofits account. And this is just almost like a pre-screener, just to ensure that you are who you say you are, that you are registered with the Charity Commission, because obviously only people that have a charity number can apply for this. So then you need to get pre-qualified. So this is quite a short form on the Google website, and that's the Ad Grants pre-qualification form, and that's just pulling together everything that we've just discussed. There will be an added element in this stage, which is to get third-party verification through a company called TechSoup, and this is basically where you put a pixel on your site, and TechSoup validates that you are actually a non-profit. Then this is kind of the easiest bit, create your account. So you just need to set up your Google account and attach all of the prior steps, and then you essentially submit your account for review. Now, they are tightening up on the rules and regulations on the ad grants. There was speculation last year that they were going to retire the grants. So they have kind of tightened up their application process, made it a bit more difficult for charities to get access to this fund. But I would recommend persevering as much as you can just to get hold of that $10,000 per month, because it is really useful and can probably help you achieve some of your objectives. Now, moving on to the regulation. So as I mentioned, there was the speculation that Google were going to retire this activity, but what they've also done is tighten up the way that charities are able to use this spend. So here are some guidelines to think about. So the ads will be entirely text-based, so we can't utilize any videos or images in these formats. So it is just those text-based with additional links. This is only for Google search results pages, and they will always appear in positions below the ads of paying advertisers. So, for example, if we were bidding on a term around pension credit, but there was a commercial organisation or entity who were actually paying real money for it, we would always appear below them. All campaigns must be keyword targeted. So this means looking at keyword groups that are relevant to your activity, that have a high quality score. So what we mean when we talk about quality score is that there is a high relevancy to the audience. So again, using pension credit as an example, if somebody searches pension credit, sees your advert and goes through to content on your site that is relevant to pension credit, then that would have a high quality score. However, if you were bidding on terms that were irrelevant to the content that appears on your landing page, you would be penalised for that. And then they've also set this threshold. So your maximum cost per click will be $2. So that means that's the most that you can ever pay for a click to your website. Now, as I mentioned previously, because they have tightened up all of the rules and regulations around how we use the grant, they are penalising people. They're looking at this activity quite closely. Obviously, they've got their own brand to protect, and they want people to have the best user experience. So they are penalising people that are thwarting these rules. So there have been account suspensions. Fortunately, we've only had one account suspension in the last 18 months. And obviously we do everything that we can to avoid our account being suspended, because this activity is essential to the work we do. I just wanted to show you quickly as well an example of our account structure. So this is looking at our individual ads themselves. So we've got a few in here on pensions, and then we group these into campaigns. So as you can see, we've got the structure there is grants, generic information and advice, pensions, or calculators. So this is just a way to enable you to optimize your accounts quickly by grouping them in a way that works for you. So it's more of a housekeeping element here to ensure that you can understand how your ads are performing. You can pause ad groups that aren't working for you, or you can optimize to ones that really are. And again, thinking about account suspensions that are happening more fragrantly now, This enables you to really keep an eye on that and make sure that all of your ads are performing within these regulations. So underpinning all of this should be your KPIs, reporting, and analytics. So you should only do this activity if it's going to be beneficial to you. But all of this needs to be based in those solid foundations of what you're trying to achieve. So always go out there and set your KPIs. So, for example, if it is to drive more donations, how are you going to do that, and how does paid search then fit into your digital marketing strategy to enable that success? So using the Google Grant in particular, you can really use this as a conversion tactic to drive people to your site. But excuse me. You can also set up dashboards via Google Data Studio, and because obviously these are all Google products, it's a seamless data integration and can really help you to visualize your data. Again, you've got a bit of heavy lifting to get these actually set up in the first instance, but then once it's set up, these reports all update automatically, essentially. And one essential element here is to remember to test. So you test all your journeys from that point of search. So depending on what keywords you were trying to target, and they should always be relevant to the work you're doing. But you want to test that entire journey. So from that keyword search right through to what you're trying to achieve on site. So be that a newsletter sign up or perhaps a direct donation. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of Google Grants. Do we have any questions on grants?
Just while we're waiting for the questions to come in, is it possible that you can show us the sort of the dashboard that you use for AdWords, Google Ads at the moment?
Yeah.
Just so that people that haven't seen it can kind of get an idea. I know you showed us a screenshot, but just
Yeah.
And then while Matt's doing that, if anyone has got any questions, please put them in the window and we'll ask.
Can you still see my screen or not?
Yes, I can see your screen, but it's the
is it the PowerPoint?
It's PowerPoint, yeah.
Okay, 2 seconds. Right, can you see Chrome now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so this is Google Ads itself. For those that haven't seen it, it looks more complicated than it actually is. But this is kind of your homepage overview dashboard, which tells you, looking at the last 7 days, how many clicks, how many conversions. Now, a conversion could be based on anything. So it could be, like I mentioned, a newsletter sign up. It could be a donation or a download or anything like that. So these cost per conversion, it seems really high, but it's always worth bearing in mind that this is not technically real money. Then we've got some recommendations that come in down here, which are really quite useful. So we can see any changes that are happening to the account. Like you can see here, this word cloud, that we've got a number of new words coming in. So it's Google is recommending that perhaps we add these into a group permanently. We can see here that powers of attorney has increased in terms of search terms, and we've got a bit of a competitor there with powersofattorney.net, so we can take a look and see what they're doing. Then we've got these biggest changes. So we can see here that we're spending less on the benefit calculators than we did in the prior 7 days, but pension credit has increased in cost here by 155%. And also we can see broken down by campaign. So when I talked you through the account structure, you can see here which of these campaigns are actually working hardest for you, and then you can optimize accordingly to them. So then we've got keywords. So our keyword that we've spent the most on in the last 7 days is pension credit calculator HUK. So as you can see there, we've spent $1,173 dollars of the grant, and that has generated 818 clicks to our website there. Again, we've got our most shown ads, so you can have a look here in a preview, and it just gives you a snapshot of how this looks to the end user, which is quite useful. And in the title here, you know, we might obviously there are character count limits, but we might have a play around and think, right, so Age UK pensions is quite generic. Do we need to make that a bit more specific? But we can really test that out, and that is the beauty of this kind of format, that you can really test and learn quite quickly and quite effectively. What else is useful? So here we've got the device split, which is always worth keeping an eye on. So unusually, Age UK is still quite heavily desktop. So as you can see, the yellow here is taking up the majority of our spend through desktop. We do anticipate that there's going to be an increase in mobile, which we're seeing through other channels, but paid search is just taking a little bit longer to catch up. We've got demographic breakdown here, which unsurprisingly, we're looking at the 55 plus skew to female in terms of who is seeing our ads.
Can I ask
And
how accurate that is? Or where that comes from? Does it come from like when people have signed up for a Google account, or how does that? Where do those figures come from?
Good question. So it's Google knows a lot about us. There is obviously the algorithm. There is a bit of predicting that it does. However, if you are logged in to Google upon search, then Google's got a better idea of who you are. Now with the demographic, well, gender and age predictions here, it is with a pinch of salt. I wouldn't, you know, put my house on it, for example. But it is just it's more indicative. So it gives us an indication of who is actually doing the search, but it isn't insight that you would base everything on.
Okay, thank
If
you.
that makes sense.
Thanks.
Cool. And then we've got a day and hour breakdown as well. So as you can see, we are skewed heavily Monday to Friday in the kind of working day time here. Now, this is worth keeping an eye on, because you might find that your audiences like to search on a Sunday evening, for example. And what you can do is upweight your spend, so make sure that you've got enough spend to cover you for that Sunday. Or likewise, if it is just Monday to Friday, you might want to consider pausing activity over the weekend if you're just not getting the clicks to come through to you. So I showed you the campaign breakdown. So we've got all of these INA groups set up, and then we can dig a bit deeper into the different ad groups themselves. So let's have a look at power of attorney. So as you can see here on the left hand side, we've got what keywords we want to be shown for. So for this ad group, we're looking at things like advice on power of attorney, arranging power of attorney. So for these search terms, this ad will show, and then we've got the destination URL there, so where we're actually pointing people to on the site. In terms of ads and extensions, so this is what the actual ad would look like, and we've got a mobile preview here as well. Now what we can do, now I don't want to do that, is look at site links as well. So you've got your main body, which should be the most relevant to the keyword search term. However, we've got what we call site links underneath. So these are up to 4 additional links, which should be relevant to the activity you're doing. But here we've got kind of a generic holding group where, so these will appear underneath this advert. And it just gives us an additional opportunity to get people to the website to fulfill your objectives. So it's always worth setting up your site links there as well. So I just wanted to show you some recommendations. This is quite a handy tool as well. So Google obviously is always tracking what you're doing, um, but this is really helpful to, particularly if you're strapped for time, to think, right, so my account's set up and running, what else do I need to do? And Google will recommend all of that for you. So for example, here we've got redundant keywords, so we should be thinking about removing some of these. Now, 276 recommendations sounds a lot, but there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of keywords in this account. So we'll just have a bit of clear up on that. And again, with like things like non-serving keywords, these are the pension bill 2017. That's obviously well out of date now, so we can just remove that. And again, I mentioned about time testing there. So Google can actually automate this for you if you use optimized ad rotation. So this is where Google is applying what it knows about your audience and what it knows about your keywords, and then upweighting your spend at those relevant times. So that is a whistle stop of Google Ads.
Cool, thank you. We do have 3 questions if you've got
Great.
just one. Oh, actually, we've got 4 now. So the first one was from Steve, and he said, what sort of activity might lead to an account suspension?
Oh, right. It's a good question, Steve. So it could be if you are going over that $2 threshold, but although I think they've put a blocker in place now to avoid that happening, but predominantly it's irrelevant keywords. So Google obviously did a lot of analysis and was seeing that some non-profits were bidding on keywords that weren't relevant to the work they were doing. So therefore having a low quality score, but the most important thing is to maintain a click-through rate. So the click-through rate you need to maintain is 5%, which is quite high, but that's to ensure that Google is showing the best content for that keyword. Now, the account suspension that we faced, I think we were down for about 72 hours. So they do turn it around quite quickly, but it's best to try and avoid that where possible, just by playing by the rules, essentially.
Okay, thank you. We have another one from Jessica. She said we got put off by the ongoing resource.
Yeah.
When I applied, it said you had to maintain a certain level of response, and we wondered how a certain level of response, and we wondered how much time that takes.
Yeah, so that's Jessica. That's similar to what I just mentioned with Steve
Yep.
about maintaining the click-through rate
Okay.
and the quality score. So it is resource, but I would say that once you've got all set up, which might take a few weeks to build the account, I would say at least if someone's checking in at least once a week, just to see that it's ticking along, then I just, that would be my recommendation, even if it's just like a few hours once a week. But I agree, I understand that might be tricky for some.
Okay. Shazia has a question, which is do we know how many Age UKs have tried this? I don't know. I know that people come and we've done a session like this before, but I couldn't tell, and I don't think you would be able to tell either how many people have done this.
No idea. I think we'd need to go out with a survey or add it. Did we not try and add it to a survey once, Christopher?
I think we did, but I think everything's in flux. So I know that everyone should have access to their Google Analytics. So, and obviously from that you can then launch into this. But I don't know how many people are doing it. Either just as a poll, if anyone in the meeting now can just say yes if you're doing it or no if you're not, and we'll just have an idea of what's going on. So yeah, you could just type that in the chat window to say yes or no. And then we'll move on to George's while we get an answer. George says that we're applying the demographics data on Google Analytics and Google Ads. Do we need to update our privacy policy to reflect this, or is it covered by things like the cookies notice on our website?
It would already be covered. So essentially in your cookie policy, if you make reference to using Google Analytics or something like that, it's part of the same activity. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. The demographic data isn't personally identifiable, and it's this is purely for analytics purposes. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Okay, and we are sending out some, we're working on some guidance at the moment. We have some up for privacy policy, but we are working on some for the guidance of the cookies at the moment for different, everyone should basically be sharing the same cookies unless you're using third parties that we don't know about, and then they might be using their own. But
Yeah.
we are sending some guidance around to the partners within the next few weeks just so that they know. So that should help you if you haven't actually mentioned this in your cookie policies already on your sites.
Yeah, it should be. There should always be a reference to analytics, because of course you've all got GA set up, so it's part of the same conversation.
Okay, we had one more question, which was from Sarah McDowell. She said we set up the Google Ads in the past and have the grants, but aren't utilising it in the moment. But we have 2 new members of staff, so hopefully we should be able to use it again soon. Okay, it's not really a question, but yeah.
No,
So
that's good to know. I did like that, because I think, even though it's $10,000 a month, so I think everyone should be applying for it because it is just free advertising spend.
yeah, and so like just to confirm, like Matt can help with certain things, but he's not our kind of main resource to do this. I mean, your first port of call really should be looking at the guidance within Google Ads and Google Grants, and they'll kind of set you up, and they can help you and support you. Matt obviously has given this overview for all of you because it's kind of his expertise within AGK. And if there's maybe really specific things that Google can't answer, Matt might be able to help you. But your first port of call should obviously be Google, because they have all the resources. And when things change, they'll be the first port of call to tell you why they've changed and how it affects anything that you're doing. So generally, no, people aren't using it. So we're hoping that everyone's going to, at least kind of take a step into it and move it forward.
Yeah.
And we're going to put this online. And I'll put it in the next newsletter, so hopefully more people will see what's going on and see how helpful it can be. So thank you very much, Matt. Unless
No
you've got
worries.
any more questions that are coming in, if not, you can email me and I can either forward them on, or you can refer to them again if you can't find anything, if you missed the first part of the webinar. But otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next one.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.